This is the first Persona game that I've played, and it was one hell of an introduction. Persona 5 is the best JRPG I've ever played, and is one of the best games I've ever played overall. Before we get more information on Persona 5 Royal, Persona 5S, and now that Joker is in Smash Ultimate, I'm going to review the original Persona 5 from 2017. This review will be a little more in-depth than some others. I'll go over the gameplay somewhat vaguely, but by the halfway point I'll mention more spoiler-related things. This review will probably be getting pretty long since this game is a 70-hour minimum RPG epic. With all that out of the way, let's get on with the review because I have a lot to say about this game. Persona 5 is high school, except it's like 50 times better. It took me 96 hours to beat it for the first time, and I only did like 60% of what there was to do. Of those 96 hours, I enjoyed about 80% of them, give or take. This game is filled with anime characters, high school, wailing electric guitars, super bizarre enemies including a penis monster, and heist movie operations. This game is so weird, but I love it. This game is really fun even though the story is pretty damn predictable. Just like in Persona 3 and 4, you balance between your day-to-day life as a high school student and exploring dungeons to progress the story. Unlike Persona 4, the dungeons have the same layout every time and has specifically designed puzzles instead of the old games that had mostly randomly generated floors. There are 8 dungeons in total, but these are kind of a mixed bag. I really only enjoyed dungeons 2, 3, 4, and 6. Dungeon 1 is just really boring since it's the first dungeon in the game. Dungeon 5 is way too long, has stupid strong enemies, boring theme, tedious puzzles, and a disappointing and kind of lazy boss battle. Dungeon 7 is stupid long, like 7 hours long, even if you know what you're doing. Not very interesting themes, and really strong enemies that have tons of elemental variety. And one of the bosses near the end is really cool, but it's right after a super tough and infuriating mini-boss, and you really have no opportunity to save before this boss. Dungeon 8 is really short. The enemies are super annoying, there are tons of cutscenes that interrupt the gameplay, and the first half only has one save point. The second half also is very interesting. It has 4 mini-bosses that are totally whack, but it has a pretty great final boss, so it ends on a high note. Despite its flaws, this is a game that you should really take your sweet ass time with. Spending the days and evenings, whether you're spending time with the characters and discovering new side to them, or exploring dungeons to progress the plot, this game will make sure you're having fun, most of the time. Throughout the game, you'll constantly see a loading screen with an image that says, "Take your time." This mantra is how you should experience Persona 5. As stated earlier, this game is apart high school shit. The day-to-day high school simulator is a lot more consistent than the dungeon crawling in terms of its fun factor. You play as a high school student in the 10th grade who has been put on probation for a crime you are falsely convicted for. Now with a criminal record, you must live in Tokyo for 1 year while sleeping in a dusty attic with a talking cat who constantly reminds you to go to sleep. There are plenty of cutscenes that play out throughout the game. During the game's cutscenes, you can say whatever response you choose, typically of 3 options. Usually pretty nice, but sometimes you can be a major asshole or sometimes really sassy. Sometimes in the story you'll get fully animated cutscenes that are fully voiced. They're few and far between, but they're pretty damn cool. Writing is pretty good. Most of the dialogue is great and characters have some pretty fun interactions. The only thing I don't like is the terminology they sometimes use. Throughout the game they said things like Hunter FF-kun, Nijima Sentai, and Futabatron. This may just be me, but this can sound kinda cringy. I played through the whole game in English, and this stuff just didn't sound right. Even so, shit can get dark when it really wants to, and this dialogue does reflect that. Arc 1 in particular is really dark throughout the whole thing. Even the arcs with a lighter tone can get really dark or sad right before it concludes. One scene right before the 4th boss involving my favorite character in the whole game really got to me. Music is absolutely amazing. Not much to say, it's just great as you can hear from the background music in this review. If you don't plan on playing this game, at least listen to the soundtrack. Some great ones are Rivers in the Desert, Booming Villain, Willpower, When My Mother Was There, Life Will Change, and Sunset Bridge. and many others I don't have time to mention. This game has a pretty unique system regarding its characters. It's called the Confidant system, but it functions just like the social links from the old games. Your Confidant rank with an individual character is ranked from 1 to 10. You start with 1 and make your way to 10 by hanging out with them or witnessing important character events. You also have like 10 options of girls to date. You can even be the lowest of the low and date them all at the same time. This game looks great. The character designs really pop. Joker looks like he robs a bank every Sunday, Futaba is adorable, and Makoto looks badass with their motorcycle. The game's UI and menus are stylish yet simple with their use of black and red color scheme. The colors really pop and the lighting is great, and the environmental design is stellar. Finally, we can get back to the dungeons. There are 8 in total, and there's some good ones and some bad ones. Most dungeons follow the same formula. After the story setup, you infiltrate the palace. They can be long, but it's not usually that hard to solve the puzzles inside. You have a third eye ability. This allows you to see mysterious objects and puzzle solutions and random secrets in strange colors. Once you finish the dungeon and find the treasure, you send a calling card to the big bad to make the treasure manifest. You go back to fight the bad guy in some crazy monster form and take the treasure. And then you're done. Some palaces have roadblocks that you need to go back to the real world to solve, but for the most part, this is the formula. The first 7 dungeons are based on the 7 deadly sins. The dungeon's owner reflects this as well as the form the palace will take, and most of them look pretty cool. And finally, the combat. There are shadows you find all around the dungeon. When you run into them or ambush them, a battle will start. There are many different types of enemies and they're all weak to different types of elemental attacks. Hit them with that element and you can knock them down. Knock down all the enemies and you can accomplish many things. You can perform an all-out attack for massive damage to all enemies, make them give you money, a rare item, or the most beneficial answer their questions correctly, to recruit them as new personas. Personas are basically what allows you to use spells like in other RPGs. You can customize the movesets to be as useful as possible, or fuse 2 personas together and make a stronger one, and even pass on stats and moves from the old personas. This fusion system is insanely deep and you could spend hours on it. That's all I got. There's a lot more, but if I went into it, I would be here all year. Persona 5 is an amazing game and an experience I'll carry with me for a large portion of my life. It may not be perfect, but it had tons of heart and style put into it, and has some amazing qualities which I've been talking about throughout this whole video. If you want a fun and memorable game and you have a whole summer stretching out in front of you, you should play and complete Persona 5. Also, that final boss is badass even if the dungeon is fucking whack. This game made me feel bittersweet when I finished it, kinda like the end of the Phantom Thieves at the end of this 100-hour long game. This concludes my review of Persona 5.